From a recruitment drive to getting cooked alive, this is Maesterminds. Welcome back, everybody, to Nerdist House of the Dragon podcast. I'm Dan Casey, and once again, we are here to bring you the besteros that Westeros has to offer with our weekly breakdown of House of the Dragon Season 2. Now, Episode 7, the penultimate episode, The Red Sowing, is Westeros' answer to Ancestry.com. It picks up in the wake of Seasmoke's Bluetooth connecting to an unexpected rider, and this episode saw the culmination and conflagration of numerous plot lines that have been building up all season long. Now, we're going to break it all down for you in just a moment, but first, joining me, as always, on our small council is Nerdist staff writer, our resident lore master, and someone who politely declined an invitation to the Targaryen family barbecue, Michael Walsh.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I tried to apply for a Dragon Keeper job, but they told me that does not exist.
It's hard to get into that union, so just keep grinding out High Valyrian on Duolingo and maybe get a foot in the door. I think my uncle knows a guy who knows a guy. But I have a bigger question for you, Mikey. We saw a lot of stuff this episode, and I guess it's only a spoiler if you're the most pedantic person on Earth, but we did not see a certain person this episode, and that is Sir Criston Cole. Where is he? Where is he in the world right now?
Dan, I do not know, and I do not care.
Oh my goodness. Incredible. All right, that's a chilled bowl of the brown for everyone who's listening that Mikey just imbibed. With that said, we're going to break this episode down for you, but first, a spoiler warning. If you haven't seen House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 7, The Red Sowing, this is your one and only warning. With that said, book spoilers will be kept to an absolute minimum, but if you haven't seen the episode yet, leave now before you hear something shocking.
Oh dear.
All right, let's get into it, shall we? So, Mikey, let's start where we always do, the beginning. What were your overall impressions of this episode?
My first time watching it, I was not a big fan. My second time through, I did not have as many issues, and the stuff that worked the first time worked even more the second time. The things I didn't like, they just didn't quite bother me as much, although I do think there are some glaring problems with this episode, some fruit of the poisonous tree from storylines that have not been handled well up to this point.
Name between 1 and 3. No, I agree with you. I think I believe you're referring to the Daemon and Harrenhal storyline, perhaps most prominently, and we'll get into that. I think I'm with you. I think this episode overall, I thought it was fine. I thought it was good to tee up what seems like it's actually going to be a pretty impactful final episode. Historically, I've always expected that second to last episode of the season, the penultimate episode. Gee, I'm so excited to say that word that my mouth
it's a great word
up with me. Yes,
it's a great word.
I'm sure it's just infuriating people that skipped their vocab test in English. But it is these episodes are usually pretty impactful, and this was, but it also felt very kind of like running in place to a certain degree. I didn't feel as much momentum as I was hoping for, and I know it's paying off this sort of storyline that we've had all season long of, gee, we sure could use more dragon riders. I wonder what we're going to do about that. I wonder who these people are that we've been spending a lot of time with all season long that we've never met before. Anyway, so I did like seeing some of these storylines pay off. I'm always a fan of anytime we get Alan of Hull, Adam of Hull, Corlys Velaryon. I'm a big fan of House Velaryon. I love anything to do with the sea snake and all of that stuff. But I'm curious for you, how did this episode compare to the rest of the season so far?
Yeah, I think it in some ways epitomizes the season. Some really good stuff, some really bad stuff, some changes that work, some changes that don't work, and also taking a long time to get to the point, right? I mean, we spent a long time for Daemon to get his Riverlands army. It's a whole season. It's kind of
shocking to me because there's fewer episodes this season, but I understand it's an expensive show, and the dragons look awesome. Like you can tell they are spending a lot of money to make those dragons look sick as hell, and I appreciate the hard work that the VFX team is doing on that because it pays off. But I just feel like from a pacing perspective, I think you hit the nail on the head. We've spent the majority of this season with old Daemon Targaryen at the spooky castle down in Harrenhal, and some of these things have just sort of felt like we're hearing our characters restate a familiar premise without really advancing along that particular plot line. And I don't know if they're spinning wheels or maybe I'm just being impatient, but I would imagine with fewer episodes, you would cover more ground, or at least like not spend as much time luxuriating in the vibes that I don't think quite sustain the story that they're telling currently. But with that said,
it took 2.5 episodes to do the sewing, essentially.
Yeah.
That was something that we thought would be one episode, because in Fire and Blood, it's one day, it's one event. And, going back to Jace coming up with the idea to look for relatives until we get to this point at the end, that was a long time for something that we thought would be one episode. And again, there are some changes here I like, but this season, for only being 8 episodes, we thought it was 8 episodes because there's just too much to get to that happens so close. And instead it's the opposite. It's like 8 episodes that could have been 3 episodes. And we thought the complete opposite going into the season. We thought, there were some people that complained about the pacing of season 1. They covered a lot of stuff. I really liked the pacing of season 1 for the most part. If anything, I actually thought they rushed a little bit too much as opposed to going too slow. This has been, I don't totally get it, and I think we might be seeing them maybe making some slower changes in this season because they want seasons 3 and 4 to be super action packed.
No, I can see that. I mean, based on without giving anything away for people that don't watch it, the preview for next week does look pretty action packed. Like, it seems like things are going to come to a head in the final episode next week. So I understand and appreciate what they're doing. I think for me, I'm just kind of a little confused. It's sort of the same issue I had with the Rings of Power season 1, where it felt like they had maybe 3 episodes of story, which they stretched into 6 episodes. And I'm a patient person. I love getting deep into the lore. I love a really dense fantasy world to unravel, but I don't know. I think sometimes that can be mistaken for treading water, and I think that is what it's felt like here a little bit. I do like a lot of what they've done, a lot of the changes. So why don't we just get into some of these changes? One of the ones, sort of how it happens, and that is sea smoke. We talked about this a little bit last week. Let's talk about that opening scene, the sort of beach standoff, that tense meeting between Rhaenyra and Adam with Syrax and sea smoke behind them, respectively. What was your thoughts about this sequence?
Very loud. It was very.
Dragons aren't quiet creatures, as we saw from the final shot.
Yeah, and the ocean's not exactly quiet either. A lot of this scene. I wish before this scene we knew more about Adam of Hull in terms of who he is as a person. If we really know very little about him, right? We know that he is bastard born, that his father not only doesn't acknowledge him, but doesn't seem to like him the way he does his brother. We have no reason behind that. There's no insight into that lack of relationship and lack of feeling. We don't even know if he's a really good person, right? Like we haven't, there's really nothing about him that we know. So when he's bending the knee to Rhaenyra, I wish there was something more there for us to hold on to. I understand there's the mystery of how much can she trust him, especially somebody who is clearly at least a little bit resentful of his lot in life, right? Like his brother, his stern brother, the most stern human being on the planet,
Alan, my man.
Yeah, I love him, but he's given up. He's given up on dreams of castles, right? But Adam hasn't. So I understand that mystery, but I do wish we knew a little bit more about him going into the scene.
Yeah, we fortunately spent a little bit more time with Alan, so we sort of get a sense of where he's coming from and why he might feel awkward in this position. Sort of clearly, you are a direct descendant of your liege lord, and he doesn't really recognize you as such. And it's an open secret. I mean, if even the late great Rhaenys knew. She's like, you didn't think it was relevant to mention it was this particular boy who plucked you from the water, your son that you just deny up and down the street until he's proven himself worthy, and I guilt you into it. So I love Alan. I'm glad we got more of him this episode as well. I like the role that he's sort of stepping into. I don't know, he's like almost filling the role of the Onion Knight for me. My favorite character, Sir Davos Seaworth from Game of Thrones. I just love anyone who is a sort of like surly sailor who's been kind of like pushed aside but is still doing their best, and I just love Alan. But I'm with you on Adam. I think that it would have benefited a bit from getting to know him a bit more, but I do love what we get from him this episode. I think that we really get a little bit more of his personality shining through, especially we get that scene with him and Rhaenyra. That is just like, I love his reaction, like, who am I to deny the gifts the gods bestow upon me? And yeah, like, of course, like he did not ask for this at all. He was not being cheeky. He didn't seize the day. The Sea Smoke chose him, a definite departure from the book, which makes me wonder if Rhaenyra has actually departed from this mortal coil. Maybe he is not alive and as well as we last saw him across the narrow sea. So I really appreciate how they're trying to give him some more interiority and personality so far.
I also just really enjoyed seeing the perspective of the dragons in comparison, because we really kind of did get to see the size differences and just even the way they look in a way that we don't always, because it's hard. You know, they're flying in the sky, or you only see one dragon at a time. Here we see two dragons facing off with humans right next to them to give us a really good idea of just how big they are. I love that. I know it's not something they can always do so well, but I thought that was really necessary and really good.
Yeah, the perspective of all the dragons in this episode definitely hammers home, especially when you see we'll touch upon this later, but just the size difference from Silverwing flying over King's Landing to the like nightmare Hindenburg blimp that is Vhagar. Just like Vhagar coming out of the clouds is haunting. That is an eldritch sight to behold, and especially when you have the most menacing 20-year-old in the world just riding astride his back. Man, I just can't wait to hear him growl some absolutely gnarly High Valyrian in the next episode, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. One thing I do want to talk about, speaking of ferocious dragon riders, is how much of this episode hinges on Emma Darcy being in full, like, really intense close-up on Rhaenyra. They have such control over their facial muscles in this episode, and just seeing the war of emotion dancing on Rhaenyra's face, really impressive, and it's a lot of a burden to put on an actor for this episode in particular, and I feel like so much of it hinges on her having this inner conflict as her schemes get turned upside down, or she has to constantly pivot to find a better solution.
I'm glad you brought this up, because this season we've focused so much on how frustrated we are with the writing for Rhaenyra. Emma Darcy's performance has been great throughout. They have overcome what I think at times has been really inexplicable writing for the character. And you're right, without Emma's performance, this could have went really wrong multiple times. Instead, we are still rooting for the queen. At least I am.
Yes.
I want her.
Don't worry. Rhaenyra will get her chance to commit all sorts of unspeakable atrocities. So far we've seen less done in her name. Well, I guess that's not necessarily true. We'll get to that with Harrenhal. But yes, they've definitely been propping up Rhaenyra as one of our like hero characters that we should be rooting for, when really, as anyone who's watched Game of Thrones knows, they're all pretty bad people, ultimately. There are heroes within there, but even the heroes do have to do some pretty reprehensible things.
I think I've said this before. One of my trepidations with them adapting this story of all stories is that in Fire and Blood, it's very much a story of villains. There's really nobody to root for. And one of my absolute favorite things the show has done is change that, right? There are actual sides to root for. And I don't just say that because I supported the Blacks before the show. I just think Rhaenyra was a more interesting character, especially if we consider that the history has treated her as a monster she wasn't. But what's frustrating now is that this has become a story of totally incompetent people. It's not even that I don't want anybody to win. I don't think anybody deserves to. And we see that with her. Here's this huge moment. A common-born man has claimed a dragon, and her Black Council wants him like arrested and all of these things. And she's like, no, treat him as a guest, but I'm not coming and explaining any of this. And they are like literally slam their mugs. Like, what are you talking about? You're not coming to your own council. Something major just happened. Even her son in that moment, we've talked about it, he is over her crap. Yeah. He's like, what are we doing? What are you talking about? Show up! I really liked that he forced his mother to reckon with his birth. This is this is something that is really big, and I don't think the show has handled it well. Alicent Hightower, even in Fire and Blood, where she is far more despicable, has a point. Rhaenyra has been given this huge responsibility. Not even talking about Aegon's dream. She's just been named heir to the Iron Throne. And we can talk about fairness, and we can talk about the difference between how men and women in this world are treated. It doesn't matter. It is the world that it is. And Rhaenyra cannot just go around doing what male heirs can do. But instead, she has 3 clearly bastard children, one of whom is supposed to inherit the Iron Throne after her. It's wholly irresponsible. The show has not fully reckoned with it. It has sort of treated it as though this isn't a big deal, that maybe she is being mistreated. She certainly is, but at the same time, she also did something irresponsible. So here we finally have Jace putting it on her. Like, did it ever occur to you what was going to happen? Did it ever occur to you the situation you were going to put me in? This is why he agrees with her counselors. You cannot go to war because if you die, all is lost. Nobody is going to accept me because I'm clearly a bastard. Everybody knows it. I know it. And now you're going to take the only actual claim I have, which is that I am a Targaryen, whether I'm bastard or not, because I have a dragon. Now you're going to say, oh, you're not special. Any bastard can claim a dragon. I really liked it, and I think it shows that sometimes the series brings elements of the story to life that are not present in Fire and Blood, but are there if you really dig deep into these characters in a way the book doesn't. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and it's understandable why he might be having some resentments boiling over. I mean, if you stop to... I saw someone on Twitter mention just like, no wonder Jace is angry. He has such a messed up home life. His mom marries his cousin, who becomes his cousin father, but his actual father is her bodyguard, who then dies in a fire and then is replaced by his now uncle father after they orchestrate the death of his cousin father. It's just a really complicated web of incest and just overall ickiness that might be challenging for a teenager to navigate under any circumstances, but especially growing up in a high-stakes world like Westeros and King's Landing. I can see why he might be a little peeved in this particular scenario, but I did like his reaction to all of this and talking about how if he's supposed to be heir to the Iron Throne, what does giving all of these other people dragons, what does that do? Does that give them a claim to the throne in the future? How is that? That doesn't give him any sort of job security or entrench him as the automatic next in line. And I think that's sort of the larger issue that they're trying to get at here, and that the democratization of dragons. Like, you know, we've seen earlier, we thought dragons and Targaryens were gods, but no, they're just meat. They're just meat, and the people that know how to control said meat. So I like there was a line this episode: "A common shipwright vows to serve you, while your brothers seek to destroy you." I think that was Jace, right? I think that was Jace who said that to Mysaria. Mysaria.
Yeah.
Sorry, that. Right. Yeah, that was Mysaria. Sorry, Jace. You probably would have said, no, Jace was a little classist and problematic in his approach, I will say.
Yeah, but at least it's human, right? That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
At least there's the part of him which is, I'm supposed to be special despite my birth. And now you're taking that away from me while also having me go to war. And it's just... because at first, in my notes, I'm like, why is Jace suddenly an a-hole? And then I was like, oh, okay, it's understandable.
Yeah.
And this is a change, by the way. This is a change from the books where Jace is the one who comes up with the idea for the Red Sowing. Rhaenyra is really struggling at this point for stuff that's already happened, plus some stuff that they have not done yet. They're rearranging things. Rhaenyra's kind of out of commission at this point. She's just so heartbroken and overwhelmed and angry, and Jace really steps up, and we've sort of seen that a little bit, but going back
like when he goes to the twins and negotiates passage and all that stuff.
Yeah, he in Fire and Blood, he's even more of like, I'm taking charge. He's the one who names Corlys Hand of the Queen, so we are getting some of that, but we're also getting some changes that I think are really good, like this one, which is him, instead of coming up with the idea to look for dragon seeds, it's him being put off by the idea.
Yeah, it is fun. It is like an interesting tension because he is the one who sparked the idea of, oh, we should look for other people with Targaryen blood. Not those people. I meant people like Steffan Darklyn. But let's talk about the Red Sowing and Rhaenyra with the most quotable line of the episode, which they were clearly, you can see them being like, oh, we're going to print this on mugs and T-shirts. Let us raise an army of bastards. What are your thoughts on that and how they're adapting this particular storyline?
This to me is like you said, this is put it on the T-shirts, right? This is a really good line, but I think it also shows Rhaenyra does not quite understand the realm she wants to rule. If there's one thing that is a through line with the Targaryens, it's that anytime they try to empower the people, the lords of Westeros rise up. This becomes a big problem for the family in the future. The second Targaryen civil war, my personal favorite like storyline from the 300 years the Targaryens are there, the Blackfire Rebellion, that comes from bastards being legitimized. Aegon the Fifth, Aegon the Unlikely, he is desperate to empower the small folk, and it all blows up in his face, and he has to like rescind some of his own orders. So yeah, it's a great line, and for someone who's trying to put, you know, her son on the Iron Throne after her, it you know, it's empowering, but it does show a lack of understanding for how things really work in this world, and that's something Rhaenyra never seems to fully get, either in Fire and Blood or on the show. There's the way you want the world to be, and there's the world you're given, and you have to be able to adjust to the world you live in versus the one you wish you lived in.
I think what's interesting about this as well is how they seem to be painting Rhaenyra and her decision making. I mean, she really is kind of like this caged animal. Like she is like we've seen. She's a dragon who, like we've seen with Caraxes. He just wants to leave Harrenhal, but instead he has to sit, wait, bide his time. Rhaenyra is doing the same. She wants to leap to action, and at the same time, she's also kind of pushing away her council. She actively resents the members of the Black Council, and I understand they're kind of dinguses, like Sir Bartimus, for example. Lord Bartimus, he deserved that slap. I thought he was going to get another this episode, but he did not because she didn't show up to the meeting. She seems to not really rely upon the council that she's called to assemble for herself, even with Corlys Velaryon. I'm waiting for her to sort of place greater trust in the people she's surrounding herself with, because right now it seems occasionally she will listen to Jace if he gets angry enough to come and find her. And she will also listen to Mysaria, because Mysaria is giving that outside perspective. And I think that's to her advantage and disadvantage, because, you know, Mysaria is someone who sees the value in these unorthodox means of attack, like a whisper campaign, sending in supplies to buy goodwill and make your opponents look bad. And also, in this case, just the value of the small folk and like having that incredible intelligence network. But at the same time, I feel like the recruitment drive was, for something that's supposed to be a little bit, it felt, I don't know, maybe it wasn't supposed to be surreptitious, but the way that word travels so quickly, I was oh, okay.
Not even that it travels so quickly that everybody knows.
How
this is so Dan, this one was bad, because I get that she has very loyal people there, and I get that there are gold cloaks that are on their side because of Daemon. But King's Landing is also full of green loyalists. You cannot have an entire tavern, an entire brothel, yelling about this plan to sneak off dragon seeds with nobody knowing, let alone them getting on a boat and shipping out. This was basically Varys talking to Jon Snow in plain view about a coup.
The tavern scene in particular, where it culminates with everyone chanting Ulf, and I get that's for comedic relief because he is just capital M moron this episode, and as we've seen him previously, I appreciate that he is this like comedic relief character, but that to me sort of undercut the seriousness of their mission there. It was like everybody knows, and not, I think to your point, it sort of makes it feel like there aren't any green loyalists in King's Landing, when that very much is not the case. Like, no one has 100% of the people's support. Both of their approval ratings are probably pretty lousy, considering their reputations and their actions. So I was just kind of, the thing that got me was when you see so many people down at the beach waiting to take the boat to their job interview, and I was like, there's not a single guard that saw this. Like, I would at least expect when we see the Green Council later for them to be like, oh, by the way, my lord, there was people shipping off hundreds of supposed Targaryen bastards to Dragonstone. Just thought you should know.
This is where the show always gets in trouble, where they want to create drama, even if it means a complete lack of logic. In Fire and Blood, the dragon seeds come from Dragonstone, because that's where the Targaryens have lived even longer. That's their ancestral home in Westeros. There are tons of Targaryen bastards there. Rhaenyra and Jace, they just call those dragon seeds. But because they wanted the extra drama here, they have to come up with this cockamamie scheme to get them there. And then what made it even worse for me personally, because I suffer from broken brain syndrome, when they showed all of the dragon seeds, all I could think about was anytime The Simpsons has a family reunion.
Yes.
And they all look basically the same, and I could not stop laughing. Dan, we're both of a certain age, which means everything in life goes back to The Simpsons.
Of course.
I could not stop laughing every time they showed the collection of dragon seeds, because all I could imagine was Homer watching his distant relatives fight each other with pots on their head.
Yeah, there were folks you could tell were sort of like hero extras, where it's like, oh, make sure we see them there. But otherwise it felt a bit like a Targaryen cosplay meetup. And that's no offense. It did make me laugh a little bit. But I will say one change I did really like throughout this season is the changes that we've had with Hugh. Hugh has been one of our big POV characters this season, giving us insight into the struggles of what it means to be one of the small folk in King's Landing. He's a blacksmith. His labor is taken advantage of by Aegon to construct more scorpions to shoot down dragons that could attack. He's promised food and gold and compensation for their labor, and just routinely pushed aside, and his loyalty is sort of pushed to a breaking point. And the way they've paid this off, it's just like really tragic when you see him and his wife. And, we learned this episode that their daughter unfortunately passed away because they couldn't get her the food or medicine she needed. And it's just, of course you'd be willing to brave hell itself, hellfire and potential death, if it meant that you could get a better life for your family. It's definitely a fascinating arc that we've had Hugh go on, and just what we see happen with him this episode. I think he has the most badass sequence, just the way that he stands up to Vermithor. It was just incredibly well done. So I thought that was very cool. Simpsons family reunion aside.
In fairness, all the cool stuff with Hugh basically just happens with him, or one character or a dragon. And that includes my favorite scene, which is him telling his wife. Those of you who have been with us a long time know that these are the scenes that make me geek out. I gasped the first time, because Hugh tells a story about his mom. This is where he gets his Targaryen blood. And the only person he could be talking about is Sarah Targaryen. This is one of the most notorious, most interesting, best Targaryens in the family's history. Real quick, you could go to Nerdist and read in depth about her, but she was a daughter of King Jaehaerys, who, after a giant scandal with multiple men, gets sent to serve with the Silent Sisters. She escapes. She goes to Essos. She starts working in a pleasure house. Jaehaerys eventually finds out, completely disowns her. It breaks his heart. He never gets over it. On his deathbed, he is confusing Alicent Hightower for his daughter, Sarah. She becomes very rich for all the reasons Hugh said. People will pay a lot of money to be with a silver-haired Targaryen princess. She becomes notorious. She even has some of her bastard sons even show up to the Great Council to make claim for the Iron Throne. And when they ask her why she's not going, she says, I already have an empire of my own. She's great. I love her. And it's so good. So this would make Hugh is the first cousin of Daemon and Viserys, second cousin of Rhaenyra, very close tie. And we get to see, there's a lot of changes. I don't know if we want to get into all the changes for the sewing from the books, but he gets, this is the payoff for all the changes they make. Hugh's moment when he claims Vermithor, who was the dragon of Jaehaerys. So Jaehaerys' exiled daughter who broke his heart, it's her son who then claims his dragon. I loved it. My lore-loving heart was geeking out. I'm a total nerd and I don't care.
Yeah, that was one moment in the show where I was like, wait. They can't be talking. They're not talking about Sarah, right? But that was a phenomenal and unexpected reveal. So I do love when the writers surprise us with stuff like that, because those are the moments where, if you've read the books and considering the nature of adaptation, things change. This was such a cool and exciting change that I certainly wasn't expecting. I was just like, oh, there's characters that we're never going to see. And there's another character that we've alluded to previously where it feels like they're really confirming that we're not going to see her and her storyline play out. You have to make your peace with certain things. So it's exciting when you do get those callbacks you might be looking for. We'll talk about some of those other characters later on. But one thing I do want to talk about as well in regards to the sewing over on Dragonstone, I think one of my favorite scenes in the episode was when you see the Dragon Keepers basically revolting and walking off the job because they think that what Rhaenyra is doing is blasphemous to their religious order. And it was cool to get that insight. It was such a great detail. They refer to dragons as like one of the only pieces of magic in this like miserable world. And I thought that was such a interesting perspective. And it's like, yeah, why else would these people risk their life and limb and like be ready to cut their throat at a moment's notice on the job, unless this is something they had a zealous or fanatical devotion to because they believe in how special and like holy these creatures are with all of their heart. So what was your take on that?
I love that scene. This is I was talking earlier that there are times when you can see that the writers on the show really are digging deep into the story in ways that maybe even if you read Fire and Blood over and over like we have, you don't necessarily think of, and it's a great perspective. I will say this for the Dragon Keepers. Rhaenyra says in this episode, maybe it's blood, maybe it's worth, maybe it's something else. Nobody actually knows why dragons bond with one specific person at a time. It does seem as though blood is necessary, but as we've heard, Rhaena almost died trying to claim sea smoke. It's not like blood is enough. And so them being like, oh, this is outrageous. Who are they? Who are they to say if a dragon can take a common born person? Who are they? Who are the Dragon Keepers? You think you know better than the dragons? I thought they were the gods. You're questioning your gods? Great. No severance. You quit. Out. Goodbye.
I had to laugh at one point because, it is horrifying what's happening when you see the plan go exactly as the Dragon Keepers thought it would, is just all of these people dying horribly in just conflagration, a nightmare of dragon fire and screaming and agony. And then you just get this close-up on Rhaenyra, and it very much felt like one of those record scratch, yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I wound up in this mess. I'm Rhaenyra Targaryen. Just as she's watching her plan go completely sideways, like, oh, maybe everyone who protested this was correct. But we do ultimately get the result that she was looking for. You gotta break a couple of dragon eggs to make an omelet, and Ulf certainly does that. By the way, point of contention. Does Ulf, the bumbling dragon seed fool of the day, does he step in dragon poop or a clutch of dragon eggs? Because it looked like both, and I was worried. I was worried that when he stepped in there, if he stepped on a dragon egg, I was like, oh, well, then you have to die probably. I'm sure Silverwing would murder you, but it must have been poop then.
I unfortunately I looked as closely as I could because initially I did think it was a dragon egg, but I'm not sure.
There was something in there that looked like an egg.
Yeah, I think ultimately the point is whether it was poop, egg, or both, that it was supposed to be gross and really silly because Ulf was in a Monty Python movie in this episode. I didn't like a single thing with Ulf. Not one thing that happened with him in this episode. Him stumbling around in the dark and stepping in poop was pretty symbolic of his storyline here, I think.
I will say I did, if nothing else, I appreciate the contrast between someone like Hugh, who has this like sort of more righteous arc where he's, coming from just squalor and just been downtrodden and just overlooked and taken advantage of. And he finally, in this moment of facing life or death, he not only saves one of the remaining dragon seeds, but like claims his birthright of claiming a dragon. Compared to someone like Ulf, who has been just using his birthright to just scam free drinks out of people when he doesn't even know if it's true himself. And when push comes to shove, when faced with destiny, he just absolutely like beefs it, just absolutely shits the bed, then actually steps in dragon poop and just somehow winds up claiming Silverwing anyway. I think that does speak to the idea of like, we don't know if it's blood. We don't know if it's temperament. You can be a Hugh, you can be an Ulf, you can be anyone as long as you have like that je ne sais quoi that lets you claim a dragon. And I thought that was, if nothing else, I can appreciate that, even though I was like, all right, let's get him off screen.
So this is where the changes, I think, are both good and bad. So in Fire and Blood, the sowing, as we referenced, was a one-day event, right? And they have Vermithor and Silverwing, but they also have 3 wild dragons, and they invite everybody to come and try to claim a dragon. It's not just dragon seeds; it's knights, it's squires, it's people who are working in the stables. Everybody can try to come. So everyone's basically approaching these dragons one at a time. There is a bravery to what the people in this episode did to even go on the platform to get that close to it. To get that close to a dragon, you have to be brave. I know Ulf is scared, but it's not quite as brave as watching a bunch of people get eaten alive or burned one at a time, and then you still do it. So by having this sort of accidental stumble, I'm an idiot, but Silverwing apparently really digs morons scene, it does lose the fact that Ulf has a certain amount of bravery that most people don't have, because most people would not do this even if they knew for a fact they were a Targaryen bastard. So I think that if they had managed to find a way to show him being brave approaching Silverwing, I think I would have liked it more, or at least I would have disliked it less. But it's really silly, and I think it's too far. I like that Hugh is being shown to be kind of this brave person, because it's not like he says I'm ready, but he also does he's ready to die, but he's also doing it in a way that will save somebody. So he's showing nobility, and Vermithor obviously responds to this strong man in his bravery. Whereas I don't get what Silverwing wants with this idiot, and it's too much. I think it's too far in one. It's really good for Hugh, but too far in the direction to Goofy Town.
It is. Silverwing can not only, oh, you've got some Targaryen blood in you, but also you kind of smell like a dragon, because he just smeared himself with dragon poop. So he's wearing camouflage. That is my headcanon now. Ulf the grayish brown, he's been upgraded. So that's my headcanon moving forward. But
Dan, George R. R. Martin has said that in the last 2 books of A Song in Ice and Fire, he will explain more about why dragons bond with certain people, which means your headcanon is all you will ever have, because we're never getting the books.
Okay, yeah. Who knows? Maybe they'll bring in like Brandon Sanderson in like 20 years or something to land the plane.
We've talked about this. You're not allowed to say those things to me.
Look, if they did it for Robert Jordan in Wheel of Time, they can do it for this. Anything's possible. And at least, if nothing else, we know Brandon Sanderson will finish multiple books in the span of time it takes George to write one. So he's prolific, if nothing else.
One chapter.
Yes. But what a chapter. What a chapter. And speaking of chapters that are seemingly interminable, let's talk about Daemon Targaryen and Harrenhal. Seamless transition. Nailed it. One of my favorite scenes, because I just couldn't believe how long it goes on and how far they push it. And that is Daemon getting absolutely clowned on by a tall baby who's now the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. So, Mikey, what were your thoughts on how this whole sequence with Daemon, Oscar, and the Riverlords plays out?
it never surprises me when a young person from a royal family is really smart and capable. Mm-hmm. They are raised by wise maesters and people who are experienced, and they have everything they could possibly need. And clearly, young Lord Tully is capable. And it's kind of the same way we saw Lyanna Mormont on Game of Thrones, right? Like, this is not unusual.
Yeah, same vibe to her for sure.
If I feel like half of this scene would be really good if it were not the culmination of a total mess of a storyline. I think that the show completely botched everything at Harrenhal and the Riverlands. This amassing of the army. It took too long. It seems like we spent an entire season for Daemon to change his mind. Right? Like, this is what the final dream with Viserys kind of is indicating, that he's ready to return to the fold, that maybe this idea that I want to be king was a bad idea and I should just support my wife. That's a long time for one single character change that involved an entire region of the realm. I don't know. Are these people really like going to be like, okay, you ordered atrocities, but then you beheaded the guy who was supporting you and everything's good now? It seemed really silly. I didn't buy any of it. Again, maybe in a vacuum it's fine, but it just doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens at the end of a very long, very tedious, messy story.
Yeah, I at least was willing to buy, especially because, they've really made a lot of hay about how House Tully is the glue that holds all of these disparate, warring, impetuous river lords together. And even though Lord Oscar Tully is young, he proves to the people there that he does have a good head on his shoulders and honors their traditions. And their tradition is that loyalty, we believe in loyalty and honoring oaths, but we also believe in justice. And I was impressed that he, like you said, he is clearly has been raised well. He has had access to stuff that other folks might not have. And it is an interesting way to see, okay, look, we know that you can probably kill us all with this dragon here. You won't get your army, but you could kill us all. But if you want our forces, which you need us alive to get, you have to prove to us that you mean business. And that means murdering this guy who was the only person to really join your cause in a meaningful way, and the guy who committed atrocities in your name, even though you told him not to use your flag, but he still did anyway, because he apparently can't follow orders, which may be a good reason to not keep working with that guy. So I was impressed with the alacrity with which Daemon was able to swallow his pride and then just introduce Willem Blackwood to Dark Sister. What were your thoughts?
Is this the most competent Daemon has been all season? Adjusting in the moment, swallowing his pride, eating some dragon poop. This was good. This is the kind of stuff I wish we saw more from Daemon, who's not. Yes, he's the rogue prince. He can be reckless. He can act without thinking, but he's not totally incompetent either. He's a fierce warrior who understands how to amass an army and lead men. There's a reason the Gold Cloaks love him so much. There's a reason he was successful in the Stepstones. And we're finally seeing the return of him there in this scene. I did like, how young Lord Tully mentioned, the Riverlands are held together by oaths, because it reminded me of how devastating the Red Wedding was for everybody, even beyond the North. Because what they did there was they broke such a sacred oath, which is, I've taken you under my house like salt and bread, right?
Yeah.
This is sacred. This is, guest rights is holds so many things together. So I did like that little reminder of how devastating that was. I don't know if I should feel bad for Willem Blackwood or not. He definitely committed war crimes, so it's not exactly like he didn't get what was coming to him. Tully was also right that he did what he wanted to do. Remember, he only said he would support Daemon if Daemon took out House Bracken for him. Mm-hmm. So, but at the same time, he was in service to the king consort, for the queen that he has sworn to. He also wasn't even given the opportunity to take the black, which I was very surprised that he didn't even think to ask for that. I don't know. Ultimately, I thought he was an interesting character. It's never good when interesting characters go, but at least I think we're moving past this. So if he had to lose his head so we can move on, fine.
Yeah, we'll sacrifice one Blackwood to leave the black halls of Harrenhal. It's just, we've spent a lot of time there, and we did. I appreciated that we finally got one last dream for the road. I hope that's our last dream for the road, with the rotting Viserys in his bedroom talking about the burden of rule. My question is, though, because I didn't spot her this episode, maybe I wasn't looking closely, but where's our girl Alice Rivers? I didn't see a barn owl either. We did see Black Phillip the goat asking Daemon if he would like to live deliciously in the hallway before he went into his bedroom. But where's Alice?
Maybe that was her. Maybe she is the goat.
Maybe.
We've seen that goat popping up. I don't know. Apparently, they couldn't just give me an episode without Kristen Cole, without taking away my favorite owl witch. Like it was just too much. Couldn't make Mikey that happy. We have to take away Cole and Alice at the same time. I don't know. I'd be surprised if we don't see her in the finale. And obviously, Harrenhal is going to play a big part in the story going forward. So still stuff to look forward to. Look, I'd rather them not force a character in. I've seen some theories that she doesn't exist.
What?
Yes, I've seen people theorize. I don't think this is right at all.
I don't believe that, but that's interesting.
It's interesting, and I don't think it's correct. But I'm saying that based on what I know from Fire and Blood. That does not mean it won't be correct on the show.
That's true.
Like, they could definitely do that. They are making giant changes. They could definitely just have it revealed that she was just nothing more than another dream.
Yeah, or we just cut back to Daemon. He's just been talking to like a skeleton in a casket or something this whole time. Like, I could see them doing that, but whereas I was of the firm belief that Varys was a merman, I do not believe that Alice is a lie told by several barn owls.
Dan, I think it's very important for you to tell people you don't actually think Varys was a merman.
No, look, we never saw feet. Varys, if you look up Varys feet, safe search off, you will not regret it. I guarantee it. Alexa, Google safe search off Varys feet right now. Thank you.
I'm very glad that I have headphones on and she couldn't hear you say that.
She already knows. But speaking of feet, let's go over to King's Landing, talk about Larys Clubfoot.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is why Dan Casey is the best. Nobody's doing it like Dan Casey.
Well, everyone in the King's Landing is on the back foot, especially old Ironrod, Larys Clubfoot. Things are not going well in King's Landing for the Blacks. It is not a good time to be of that party. And I like seeing the power games that are going on as these different counselors vie for influence and control. You have that really fascinating sequence at the beginning with Ironrod and Larys Clubfoot discussing rumors they've heard, which, as we know, as the audience, are true, that Seasmoke has claimed a new rider, or our new rider has claimed Seasmoke. And what was your take on this whole sequence, Mikey?
This shows the Rhaenyra, her small council doesn't trust her. Mm-hmm. Aemon's small council doesn't trust him. Ironrod knows that this is the type of information he's supposed to bring to the Prince Regent, but he's terrified of the Prince Regent. He doesn't want to be the bearer of bad news. So he goes to Larys. He's like, hey, I got a whisper. You're the master of whispers. You should probably tell him. No. But just how do you know this? A guy heard it from a kid who heard it from another guy who...
Him going down the list was incredible because it's like, look, a proper journalist, never burn your sources. But also, it's very funny to hear that it's like ninth-hand news at this point. But it's accurate ninth-hand news.
Purple monkey dishwasher potential here.
Yeah, pretty much.
So and we see Larys, who's already out of favor with Aemon and has aligned himself with Aegon. He's not going to bring bad news, and he's definitely not going to bring bad news that might not even be true. But then we see the peril of making your own counselors afraid of you. Aemon is totally unprepared for any of this. And maybe if he had heard about Seasmoke having a new rider, he might have been able to act before Rhaenyra got 2 more dragon riders and completely shift the balance of the war. So that was a really good scene where the subtext was really strong, and I really enjoyed it. And this reminds me that, once again, I just wish that we knew more about Ironrod, because he's not inconsequential to the story. He's a member of the Green Council. There's not that many of them. The show is actually strangely like doesn't have as many characters as you might think, even though every episode has thousands of people. And I wish that instead of treading so much water in storylines, that we were getting to spend more time with some of these other people, like Jasper Wilde.
Yeah, it is definitely, this is like the most we've gotten to hear him speak outside of the context of one of the council meetings. And it's interesting that even he's like feeling the need to tread carefully, which is, it makes sense because when you pan down from the wall, you can see that Aemond is cleaning house. He is sending those idiotic Kingsguards that Aegon appointed to the wall for their incompetence and their role in failing to protect the Queen and the Queen Dowager during the riot that we saw previously. So he's already kicked his mom off the council, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of faith in Larys. So it's understandable everyone may feel their position is threatened under his regency, because he doesn't want it to be a regency. He wants it to be a permanent thing. And it's definitely interesting times there. Less interesting to me, or more just confusing, because it kind of feels like, to me, it feels like they've somehow missed the forest for the trees. This is Alicent's forest quest, where she goes camping and then just reenacts an Evanescence music video. Someone wants to wake her up inside. Mikey, what is going on with poor Alicent?
I've never related to Alicent Hightower more than when she was floating in the water, because I wish that I could also go off into the woods and forget about what's going on in her story. I was laughing. I was just laughing through these scenes. First off, Olivia Cook's great. The scenes were shot beautifully, but I was laughing because the show has no idea what to do with her, to the point that they literally sent her to the woods to live by herself. Yeah. Like we don't know what to do. And this is butterfly effect. We keep talking about the butterfly effect. They took away a lot of her agency. Alicent in Fire and Blood is the number one person pushing for Aegon's coronation. She's a major player. There's a story between her and Rhaenyra. The show took that away from her. It has sidelined her. And now we're left with her having literally nothing to do except just think about how things stink. She's doing a great job with this version of the character. I just don't think it's as compelling. And I think putting her in the middle of nowhere so they didn't have to come up with anything was on the nose and not the way they meant.
Yeah, it didn't feel, I don't know, it didn't feel like authentic to the character. Like, I can understand that she feels caged and sidelined and all of that, but it just feels like a abdication of responsibility by both the character and the writing to a certain degree. It's like, well, we do have to touch base with her, but I just was like, okay, and what's the end game here? Like, are they going to bring you back into the fold? Like, we're clearly teeing up this Aegon Aemond rivalry with Larys pushing Maester Orwyle to give Aegon physical therapy so he can stand up to his brother who's trying to seize power. I did like that line about he may not be able to rest for a long time yet. Like, clearly Larys has big plans for Aegon, and maybe Alicent Alicent clearly had a role in Aegon's council. Maybe they're banking on that being the case, but I don't know, man. It was just a bummer because it's like you said, Olivia Cook crushing it. She's phenomenal. I just want her to have more interesting stuff to do than go traipsing through the woods with Rickard. She last episode was like, maybe I was a really bad mom, and in this episode she's like, I'm just going to abandon all my children. Like, my poor daughter is grieving. Oh my god,
maybe
poor Helena.
My son is a burnt mess, and I kind of pushed him into this dragon fight where he was maimed. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to abandon all of them, and I'm just going to go for a swim. And I'm also going to take one of the 7 Kingsguards with me. Not that they need there, to be in King's Landing.
I hear that, forest bathing, just taking a walk through the woods is supposed to be very restorative, de-stressing. So, I understand. That's why people who live in cities are like, I got to get out of town for a weekend. That's just how Alicent's feeling right now. But unfortunately, she's probably the only person who can actually get out of town unless you are one of 700 Targaryen bastards that can take a readily available boat. That just going back to that. I mean, I know it's pedantic, but maybe it's meant to be seen as a side effect of Larys not willing to share intel with Aemond, or Ironrod being afraid to give Aemond bad news. But the fact that not a single Green learned about her recruitment drive until Ulf is just doing dragon donuts over the skies of King's Landing, I was like, come on, this makes people look preposterous.
Yeah, it's the dance of the incompetent dragons. Like, nobody's good at this, and it's not like you can't make mistakes. Right?
Yes.
Aemon should be better at this. What has he done well? He locked everybody into the city, turned him against him. He's not responding to the propaganda. He's apparently closing the gates does not mean closing the beaches,
no.
Even though Dragonstone's right there. Even though Dragonstone just sent a bunch of boats full of food to undermine you. I just want somebody to be really smart. Just give me a couple episodes of someone kind of crushing it.
Oh, don't worry. When Otto Hightower comes back, you'll get those episodes.
Dan, where did we make an Otto watch?
There was an Auto Watch graphic. Yeah, we're still on Auto Watch. We're still
Auto
on
Watch. Auto Watch.
We will keep watching the skies and the ground for him, but it just sounds like that stuff might be a little challenging right now, because we do hear about another Hightower with whom trouble is brewing. That is Ormond Hightower and his host of troops that they're waiting upon. Sounds like they're getting tied up with some overall discontent thanks to the untimely murder of Lord Beesbury, who was on the council previously, until Sir Criston Cole turned him into a fine red mist. But we also do hear, there's dragons on Rhaenyra's side, and there may be a new dragon on the side of Aemond, Aegon, and the Blacks, because we're also on Darren watch, because they hear that Darren's dragon Tessarion has come of age. So maybe we'll see a little bit more there. What were your thoughts on these little crumbs they sort of like sprinkled in at the end?
This is the stuff I love, where they just kind of quickly mention something, and it has the potential to be huge later. Mm-hmm. I always felt like this with Game of Thrones, where it really rewarded you the more you paid attention. I understand that we're helping people pay attention, but I would always say never dismiss any person or place they mention. They might not matter, but they could. I don't know what they're going to do with the Lord of House Hightower, Otto's older brother. But they did mention, as you said, that allies of House Beesbury are on both sides. Mm-hmm. Clearly, they are teasing some sort of conflict. But as you mentioned, that Darren's dragon has taken to wing. This is both really big and not quite as big as what we see going on at Dragonstone, because if Tessarion just took to wing and Darren could ride it, it's still not a very big dragon. But even a small dragon that can fly and rain down dragon flame is valuable. So we are really seeing a lot of pieces of the puzzle put in place here, and I'm excited. I just wish this stuff had happened 2 episodes ago. I wish we were hearing about the Hightower. We saw the Lannister forces for 5 seconds. And then they were like, we're not moving.
We spent our budget on that lion in a cage that we brought with us.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we don't get to see the Hightower host. Maybe season 3.
There are armies everywhere. Just get to the fireworks show. And my 3rd Simpsons reference of the day.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fireworks show, it seems like we're also heading to one of those in the Vale, which we see reports of. I couldn't believe they wouldn't even give those poor children like a wagon or something. Like
the princes of House Targaryen.
All right, kids, hit the road. Start walking to Essos. Start walking to Pentos. Those poor little kids. And then we see Baela. We see Baela, right?
Rhaena.
I even wrote down Rhaena in my notes. My apologies to Baela. You have a dragon.
Rhaena. The way you can remember is Rhaena only has one expression. She's always very upset.
I get it. She's been basically exiled to babysit children and just sent away from her family, and she doesn't have a dragon of her own yet. So
the Vale's cool. Wouldn't you want to go vacation in the Vale?
Oh, look, I think she has a very different response here to being in the Vale than she does in the books, and it's interesting to see how that's going to play out, another butterfly effect like you mentioned. And it seems like she is off to go claim a wild dragon for herself, so we'll see how that plays out. I'm curious if we will see her find said dragon in the season finale. But speaking of which, we are dragging things out, which means we need to start wrapping up the episode. So, Mikey, as always, who was your MVP for episode 7?
With all due respect to young Lord Tully, I have to give it to Hugh. Can I just say he's known as Hugh Hammer or Hugh the Hammer in the book? I'm tired of walking around this. Hugh Hammer. He claims Vermithor. I mean, come on. He's not quite as big as Vhagar, but he's probably more fierce. He's more dangerous, and I don't know how you can give it to anybody else when somebody claims Vermithor, who is a great dragon, very genuinely one of my favorite dragons. And I usually don't even really care too much about the dragons. I care more about the riders.
Yeah, Hugh was going to be my my top pick as well, just because I love what they've done with his story this season. But just for the sake of changing things up a little bit, I will give it to the person I think who's making the biggest moves in this episode, and that is actually Larys. Because Larys is someone who he's just moving. He's real G's moving in silence like lasagna. He is just doing some sneaky stuff in the background. I love this sort of proxy war he's setting up. And I like you mentioned before, Matthew Needham, he's a phenomenal actor, and I'm just really impressed with his work every time. He's one of those people where if he's in a scene, you're just drawn to him because he's about to drop something very, very compelling. So I'll go with Larys. In my heart, it's Hugh, but I just wanted to change it up and expand our MVP ship a little bit. But with that said, were there any Easter eggs or moments that fans might have missed? Anything we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to bring up?
Yeah, rapid fire. Sir Rickard Thorne, the King's Guard who went with Alicent. He has an amazing storyline in Fire and Blood, but I don't know what's going to happen with that because of other changes they've made. But definitely a fascinating character. I really like him. One of the changes, and listen, go to Nerdist.com and you can read about all of the changes from the book to the show for the Red Sowing. But one that I thought was curious was Alan didn't even try to claim a dragon. In Fire and Blood, he is at the sowing. His brother is obviously successful. He's also there. There's the stuff with Sea Smoke claiming him as a show creation. Alan gets burnt, and that's the end of his attempts to being a dragon rider. Sir Simon Strong had the funniest moment of the episode.
Maybe I should change my MVP because he is my favorite character this season, bar none.
Oh dear. just like, oh no. He's so funny, so good.
Oh dear.
I mentioned this earlier. Go back and watch the scene where Corlys goes to see Alan. Alan has the most stern face any human being has ever had. I loved your comparison to Sir Davos, one of my favorite characters ever, but it's Sir Davos without a sense of humor. It's so good. And we didn't talk a lot about, you referenced it, but we didn't really talk about Aemon getting rid of the lickspittles. My wife loves when I mention lickspittles. She's also a physical therapist who got really excited. She yelled out, "First PT" for Aegon.
Amazing.
This is an excuse to get rid of them. They should not have the job, right? They already have broken their vows by going, although that's every Kingsguard breaks their vows going to a brothel with the royal family. They did not deserve this. They are being punished for Aegon being stupid. Now, look, maybe don't make sacred vows if you don't want to be held to them. But they did. Somebody in the middle of a mob grabbed the queen's arm, and they chopped off his arm. Did they make things worse? Yes. Is that understandable? I would think in the middle there, where they're being surrounded and their inexperience, that is being sent to the wall is too harsh a punishment. At least they didn't lose their head. At least they have a chance. If you're sent to the wall, you have a chance to escape the wall and go to Essos, which is better than death. And the only other thing is, we know eventually dragons are going to disappear from this world. I'm very curious if we will find that the Dragon Keepers all kind of quitting had any sort of impact on that. We know there are Dragon Keepers in King's Landing as well, but a bunch of them just walked off the job. Who knows what becomes of them? And when we've talked about this theory before, the Maesters are the ones who really kill off the dragons because they don't want a world of magic that they can't control. They want a world of science and knowledge. Would the Dragon Keepers sticking around on Dragonstone have helped prevent that because they knew how to care and look after the dragons the most? I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that coupled with just the like incalculable bloodshed and attrition that comes with a grueling civil war like that they're in the middle of, I think that knowledge drain is certainly going to have a multiplier effect. And who knows, maybe we'll see some of them come back into the fold, but I wonder if it's salvageable at this point, if they're just like, no, you've desecrated what we hold most dear, and we're just going to go back to Old Valyria. We're going to take a cruise there and just accept that we'll get grayscale.
For anybody who doesn't know, you actually can't go to Old Valyria. If you go to Old Valyria, you do not survive. We mentioned Sarah. She is very similar to another famous notorious Targaryen whose story ends very painfully after she visits Old Valyria on her dragon. I will say this, without the Dragon Keepers, what's becoming of the clutches of eggs? Like, we don't know. We don't know what it actually means to like take a dragon egg and take care of it. Like what kind of process? So that could be one of those things that ultimately proves to be very important in ways we never could have known.
That would be very fascinating. And that's an example of this sort of like butterfly effect thing where it's not something they really touch upon in Fire and Blood, but it's something you can absolutely extrapolate on. So I'm super curious how that's going to play out. And hopefully we will see, well, maybe not that exact plot line, but we're going to see a lot of stuff come to a head next week in the finale. Do you have any predictions or anything that you are anticipating, maybe a reunion, a character showdown, something like that you're hoping to see next week?
I, at the beginning of the season, said, I think I know where it's going to end. Mm-hmm. I still believe I am correct.
Interesting.
But if I say it, it's a huge spoiler.
That's fair. That's fair.
If you are very welcome to reach out to me, anybody listening or watching, to ask me what I think. Some people have over the course of the season. I do think that next week is going to be absolutely jam-packed. That we are going to get a bunch of scenes that we would have expected to already get by now. However, I also believe that we are going to see more rearranging of events. I think that there is going to be an important moment that does not take place until season 3, even though it should be the impetus for how I think this season is going to end. So that might have been a little confusing. There's something that happens in Fire and Blood that leads to my prediction for how the season ends. I think they're going to rearrange those.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. All I will say is that I would like to see Daemon interact with literally anyone outside of Harrenhal, and I'm hopeful that we will see that next episode because I want to see him bouncing off other characters. I think there's a lot of fun ping pong to be had there, conversational tennis, so I'm looking forward to that. But with that said, folks, that is all the time we have. That's a wrap on our breakdown of House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 7, The Red Sowing. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be here all season long, all one more episode. And we'll also have plenty of deep dives into Hot D lore waiting for you over on Nerdist.com. Now, with that said, in the meantime, Mikey, where can people find you and send a digital raven to maybe talk about your predictions?
Blue Sky and Twitter, Burger Mike, all one word. And of course, you can always find me at the greatest website anybody ever created, Nerdist.com.
You can also find me on said website or online at Dan Casey or at OsteoFerocious. All right, folks, with that said, thank you once again for tuning in and listening. We appreciate it. In the meantime, though, tell us, what did you think of this episode? What was your favorite moment? What is your prediction for the finale? Let us know in the comments, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.